So, welcome back to the Leadership Series. I'm Elle Ingalls. I am your host, and I am the creator of the Pressure Free Method. That's the on the go stress management method. It's particularly effective for high achievers who don't want to take time off or slow down. It's actually not how stress works anyway. So, we have a very special guest for you. His name is Jason Goldberg. Jason and I are just meeting, which to me is always really exciting. So welcome, Jason, to the show. Please introduce yourself and let's just dive right in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, pressure-free method is something that my Jewish mother needs to learn. So who I am, my name is Jason Goldberg, as you just mentioned. Yeah, I love this. What you guys don't know before we hit record is that Elle said, yeah, you can just say whatever you want about yourself. And I'm like, where do I even start? So I'm going to just say this very quickly so we can get into the good stuff. I don't really care so much about my titles or where I've been or anything else. That's all the ego-based stuff. I just want to get to a place of service. So what I always say is that I am somebody who is trying to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than I found them. I could do that in my current iteration as a speaker and a coach and an author and a host and doing all these things, but I could also do it as a Starbucks at barista. I could do it, a barista rather at Starbucks. I could do it as a cashier at Target. I could do it anywhere. The key here is just how can I help to contribute to people changing their state to have 5% more joy and 5% less suffering. That's kind of all I care about.
Oh, I love it so much, Jason. And now I know exactly what, the person that spoke before you is a person said we need to lighten the labels. And you just said you wouldn't throw out the labels. So
Yep.
perfect.
Yep.
Well, yeah, just dive in. I'm excited.
Amazing. I'm excited too. So where should we start?
Let's go ahead. Let's do gallery because I want to let's be together for this. I'm curious. So joy is your deal. 5% more,
Yep.
which means 5% less suffering.
Yep.
That's actually relating to what Uwe shared with us a couple of days before when he shared how when you let something go, what are you letting in? So share a bit about what you do and how you let joy in. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a huge question. I mean, it's really all just about lightening up, right? So if you were to look at a hot air balloon, for example, hot air balloons are not really living to their fullest potential when they're on the ground. That's not what they were built for, right? They're built to be in the sky. And what many of us do, myself included, for the first 30 years of my life, because I was not somebody who was born with any kind of personal growth or spirituality or consciousness or anything else. I was raised in kind of the victim mindset and the victim language. Who can I blame for this? And this is just the way I am. And based on what's going on in the economy or in the White House, that dictates my happiness or my sadness. These were the ways that I was raised. So I didn't have a roadmap for this growing up. But as I went through my own struggles, and that included, I was raised by a single mother. My dad left my mom as soon as she got pregnant. He told her have an abortion or he was leaving, and she said, I'm having the child. And so he left, never came back, never saw him, never saw a picture of him, never saw anything. And then having to be the kind of man of the house and help to manage my mom's emotions, her anxiety, her depression, and being a young kid and kind of taking that on. And then having my own struggles with anxiety and depression and sadness, and finding the only way that I could cope with those things was to find some kind of coping mechanism. For me, it was food. And so from a very young age, I was the chunky kid. By the time I was 15, I was 250 pounds. By the time I was in my late 20s, I was 332 pounds. And on top of that, I was, again, depressed on antidepressants since I was about 15 or 16 years old, suicidal ideation, just all of these things, even though I was a director of engineering and operations for an IT consulting firm. I was the youngest director in the history of the company, making well over 6 figures in my 20s, had the house and the car and all these things. But again, I still had massive levels of depression and sadness. And so what it took for me, and I write about this in my book, Prison Break, in the first chapter of the book, was it took something major. I don't like to call it a wake-up call, but it took something major to really help me see that the way that I was living, there was something I was contributing to that situation. And there's a lot that I was contributing to the situation of my own suffering, but a lot of that was the seriousness with which I approached life. Everything was life or death. Everything.
Oh, yeah.
Everything was major, right? And so when we loop back to the hot air balloon, it was very much like I was in a hot air balloon and I was pulling like mad on the pull string to get the fire to go up inside the balloon to get it to raise off the ground. And it would. but it was using so much energy. I'm like, why is this thing not raising off the ground? It's designed to ascend. Why is it not raising off the ground? And it's because I still had all these sandbags, right, around the sides of the hot air balloon. It was my physical weight, it was my emotional weight, it was my financial weight, worrying about money all the time. It was all these different forms of weight. I was so overweight in my body and my mind and my soul that no matter how hard I was pushing and ascending, and even though I was doing well, I was using all of my energy to do that. And it was leaving me with nothing left for myself. And that's where the sadness and depression and eating and everything else came from. So my entire job on myself, forget doing it with other people, my job for me, my transformation for me was to take radical personal responsibility, and also to learn that if I want to level up, I need to lighten up. And so lightening up for me is taking those sandbags off of the hot air balloon, challenging, questioning these thoughts that are not even mine, understanding where I need to shift my identity or understand how to navigate my thinking better. And when I do that for myself and with clients, the sandbags naturally fall off, the hot air balloon does what it's meant to do, and it takes way, way less pressure and energy to be able to do it. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I do.
Oh my gosh. Now, something I heard that I'm like hanging on to is that here you were, incredibly successful, house, car, incredible, making great money, and you said financial weight.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is I used to think financial security was a number, right? Once I have this number in the bank, then I'll be financially secure. But it never happened, because once you start making the money, then it becomes, well, what if I lose this job and I can't find another job making that much money? Right.
Right.
So it's either, yes, you're either fixated on acquiring the money or fixated on retaining the money. And both of those fixations cause undue suffering, undue stress.
Yeah.
And so what I saw for myself, and I'll ask this a lot of times when I do keynotes, I say, what's a bigger deal, running out of milk or running out of money? Sounds like a very stupid question for obvious reasons. And 99.99% of the audience, besides one person who was like a serial fanatic, said running out of money. That's a much bigger deal. And of course, I'm going to play stupid and ask, why? Why is it a bigger deal? Why do you think it would be a bigger deal to run out of money instead of running out of milk?
So I couldn't afford the milk. If I ran
You wouldn't be able to afford the milk. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Why else might it be a bigger deal to run out of money than to run out of milk?
You're talking to a bank president's daughter. It's really scary. But to keep my business alive, I actually sold rings off my fingers. Like, I risked everything to start my business in some ways. So yeah, the money question, why the money? It just gets to so many real deep-seated security issues for people.
Yeah, and exactly. And so most people would say, and another way people would say that, that's exactly right, is the stakes are higher, right? If I run out of money, the stakes are much higher than if I run out of milk, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't important things in our lives that require money, but what I'm saying is, in that situation, if we go to kind of the meta level of what's going on, it's that if you run out of milk, you have full trust in your resourcefulness to find more milk.
Right.
You know where to find it. And in fact, you go to your grocery store, you say, I know where to find milk. And what if you get to your grocery store and they're out of milk? Oh my God, now what am I going to do? Well, luckily there's 14 different milk alternatives that you could drink. If you're in California, they got oat milk and almond milk and shark milk and raccoon milk and all kinds of different milks. So you'll always be able to find it. And even if you went to the store and they were completely out of all milks, you may drive 5 minutes down the road to another grocery store. And if all grocery stores are out, you may drive 2 hours to a farm, but you trust your resilience and your resourcefulness. We don't have that same level of trust for ourselves when it comes to something that feels high stake like money. But if we were to bring that level of resourcefulness and that understanding that our resourcefulness is more powerful than our resources, then running low on money, let's say, would just be a call for you to step into more creativity and service. It wouldn't be something you had to be terrified about.
Right. That's so brilliant. It's beautiful. Yeah. So these sandbags.
Yeah, they're big. They're everything.
They're big.
They're an illusion. I mean, I used to make funny T-shirts because I'm actually quite an introvert in the world. And when I was starting my coaching business, I didn't want to do outreach. People were like, "Oh, you got to cold call. You got to do this. You got to just cold outreach." I'm like, that feels terrible. I don't want to do that at all. And so, but I knew that if people came and talked to me, that I would be fine. I love talking to people if they would just come and talk to me first. So I needed to get really creative and say, how can I get people to come to me to talk about my business? And so I started making these funny t-shirts with funny sayings, and I would wear them everywhere I went. And inevitably somebody would come up and say, "Hey, that's a really funny shirt. Where'd you get it?" And I'd say, "Oh, I made it myself." And they say, "You made it yourself? Are you a fashion designer?" I said, "No, I'm actually a coach." And they go, "What the hell's a coach?" And then we're in conversation and everything's great. And so one of the shirts I had was, "I've got 99 problems and 98 of them don't actually exist." Right? That's the sandbags. It's this misconception that all of these things that we think are big problems in our lives are actually just threats to our ego. It's not actually a threat to us. We're okay. But as soon as we get caught up in this identity of, I am my thoughts, I am my emotions, I am my body, I am my history, I am my stories, I am my experience, I am my whatever, then of course everything becomes a threat to that. And now I have to protect against the world. And that energy of protecting against the world is not an energy of creativity and expansion. And so that's kind of what that whole sandbag thing is all about. It's like, how can we lighten the load? How can we challenge these stories so that they can be present in our lives? I'm not going to say for a second that I don't have sad thoughts or sad feelings or even feel depression or anxiety sometimes. I of course do. It's part of the human condition. But when I understand what's actually going on in those moments, it's much easier to navigate that than when I assume the sadness is who I am, the anxiety is who I am, the depression is who I am. So it's getting clear on who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge change in the last 20 years. People now say my anxiety. Nobody said that 20 years ago.
Right.
No one would claim it as my anxiety. They say, "Oh, I'm feeling a little nervous today," or, but we actually call it ours. I
Yeah.
work on with my clients a lot. It's just like, and it's with the sandbags. Do you work on do you have an order of how you work on them with people, or how does that develop? I'm curious. I'm just picturing myself in the hot air balloon. I
Yeah.
also picture myself, and I quoted this the other morning. I said to my husband, "Do you remember this?" I can't. I don't know how it works. The Wizard of Oz, when he has no more sandbags, like they're all gone, and he's floating away, and he can't come back to Earth to her.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yep. Yep. I get that. Yeah. Yeah. And there's no order, right? Because the rigidity of order when it comes to human beings negates the human that's sitting in front of you. And so what I mean by that is I want to meet people where they're at. And
Yeah.
so whatever their specific sandbags are, we go into that. Now, what I will say is that regardless of your sandbag, it's typically what I call an SFM, or a simple fundamental misunderstanding, that causes that. And so what I mean by that, and why that's important to note, is there's an old fable in the Vedantic tradition about somebody walking through a desert and they see a coiled up rattlesnake that's getting ready to attack them. And of course, their entire body seizes up and they get terrified. "Oh my God, I'm going to be bit by this rattlesnake and I'm going to die. And my body's going to rot and decompose in the desert. And my family's never even going to know what happened to me." And just all these things happen. And we know what it feels like to get hijacked. Now, I definitely know what it feels like to get emotionally hijacked that way.
Yes.
And then when the person looks a little closer, they notice that it's actually a coiled up piece of rope and it's not actually a snake. That realization of the truth means there is no more work to be done. That person who now sees the rope doesn't say, "Well, I got to schedule a call with my coach to talk about my relationship to ropes." It's a non-issue. There's nothing to do anymore.
Oh, so good.
And so that's such a big thing, is like getting to the truth of the matter, seeing what's really going on. It doesn't mean that it doesn't still hurt when things happen, but like if you have a child and the child didn't sleep well or hasn't eaten or whatever it is, and they start yelling at you, "You're the worst mom ever. I hate you." As a parent, you're like, "Yeah, sweetie, I know I'm the worst mom ever. You hate me." Yeah. They're just tired, or they're just hungry. So you don't take them seriously. And yet the thoughts that we have in our head, we take them so seriously.
Yeah.
And so I'm such an advocate of having a more casual relationship with our thoughts.
Yeah.
And speaking of being a kid, I remember this thing happened when I was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. Again, raised by my single mother. And I was a pretty good kid as far as I could go to the adult parties and I wasn't disruptive, and they would let me just hang out and do my thing. And if we went to the store together, to the mall or something, mom didn't have to have one of those weird baby leashes on me.
Right.
Let me walk by her and I'd be okay. But this one day we were in the mall, we were in a department store, and I guess I did wander away from her. I'm a little boy, curious little boy. I wander away from her. And this is where I'm going to be very vulnerable here, Elle, and I hope I don't get backlash or get canceled for what I'm about to say. But I'm this little 6-year-old boy. I go kind of wander off and I find myself in the women's clothing section. And I happen to see a mannequin wearing a dress. And as a little boy, I'm curious. And I walk up and I lift up the dress and I look underneath it. I'm just curious. I don't know what's happening. I'm just curious.
Right, right.
So my mom, I guess, noticed that I wasn't around her and looked over as this was happening. And of course, like Usain Bolt across the department store to grab me as quickly as possible and extract me from that situation. Now, my mom, looking at me doing what I did, had a very serious relationship with what I did because she's thinking, oh my God, people are thinking I'm a bad parent. I have a deviant son. I have this defiler that's a part of my life. And, what are they going to think of him? What are they going to think of me? She has this very serious relationship. And so it caused her to get stressed and to run over and grab me away.
Right.
Now, think about other people who may have been in the mall and saw that whole thing happen. They probably would look over and say, oh my God, look at this kid. He's so cute, or he's so curious, or I remember my son doing something similar.
Right.
Or they may look at my mom and say, oh my gosh, single mother, man, it must be so tough to raise a kid. And man, I give her so much kudos for what she's doing. And it's probably a lot of work. They had a totally different reaction because they have a casual relationship with what I was doing. They didn't make what I did mean something about who they are.
Right.
So we can be aware of that when we're taking our thoughts and we're taking the situations too seriously and ask ourselves, what would it look like if I had 5% more of a casual relationship with this thing? I didn't get married to it. I didn't make it the center of my universe, but I had just a casual relationship to it, like these people in the mall. Then I don't have to get rid of it. I don't have to reframe it. I don't have to pretend it's not there. I can just be with it and let it be a part of my experience without it being some kind of detriment to my experience.
Okay, this is a huge takeaway. That 5% casual relationship.
Yeah.
I love it so much because number one, it's a baby step.
Right.
Okay, if we can start to open that up, then it can start to bloom and blossom. And soon we're not overreacting to the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like the stories we go in that mind so quickly, boom, 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 and how we layer them on is really huge. And lately, it happened just last week with a client of mine where she's already put appointments in place to take care of a situation. Like everything is scheduled, all this is going on, but she's still ruminating about it. So I came up, like, as she's telling me, I just kind of open up, like, how can I help her? Is always what I'm thinking, like, how can I serve? How can I serve? And the slogan came up for me. Slogan's one of my pressure-free tools. I've already taken care of that.
Mm.
And I gave her that, and she just went, oh, I have. Like, I have. It's real. I actually set everything in motion. So that I said, now you can open up your brain space. You don't have to be continually thinking about this thing because you've already taken care of it.
Yeah, I love that.
It's like watching her just open and breathe and be like, okay, that's the same thing as this. Okay, let's have a casual relationship with this thing right here.
Absolutely.
I love it. It's really beautiful. That's beautiful work. So there's no particular order to the sandbags, of course, because you're going to work with each person individually.
Right. Yeah.
And figure out which ones. That's like, I actually have an order to the beginning of my tools, but after that, I'm just sharing lots of different tools over 40 ways to break the stress response. But I set an initial order and I changed it just a few weeks in. My first clients were all these baseball players and financial planners. Those were my first clients.
Makes sense. A lot of crossover with those two groups.
2010, the baseball team my kids were on, it was their team I was working with, and their head coach was a financial planner.
Oh, okay.
So hence he hired me to be his private coach, and suddenly all these other people want me to work with them because it's 2010.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, interesting. I started an order, but then I changed the order and I completely stopped prejudging. Like, oh, I think these tools will be helpful based on an intake, but no, I don't know until I share. Like,
yeah, and you actually are you're tapping into something that's also really powerful and you just said it, and this is actually what my TEDx was actually all about. This was getting out of living in the I know mind, right? Being in the I don't know mind, right? Having that beginner's mindset, and it's such a huge thing. There's when you look at there's certain martial arts that, I don't know if you know this, but the way that black belts came about, do you know how black belts became like the sign of mastery? Well, so over time, you start with a white belt, and over time, as you're practicing, you don't wash the belt, and over time it would get dirty. And so it became a darker belt. And so that became a sign of mastery, right? Because the belt became kind of darker. And so black belts became the sign of mastery. But what most people don't know is that even after somebody becomes a black belt in those original traditions where they didn't wash the gis or wash the belts as much, at some point that belt would be so worn that it would start getting tattered and frayed, and that top level would kind of start to fall off, and you'd see the white belt again underneath. And
Oh,
that was a reminder for them that even if they become masters, they can always have a beginner's mindset. There's always something new to learn. There's always some way to deepen your understanding of what it is you're doing. And so just that notion that you were saying, living in the I don't know mind, bringing more humility to life, not trying to control life so much with my arrogance, thinking that I know how everything should unfold and I know how long everything should take. And this is what I should be doing with my life. And this is how long it should take to launch this. All of these things are just arrogance towards life. And so if we can bring more humility, more of the I don't know mind to life, to be fully engaged, fully involved with
right.
life. I'm not saying sit
Yeah.
on the couch and hope for the best. Be engaged with life, but have high engagement with low or no attachment.
Yeah. My son just graduated from Columbia. So you got an Ivy League school with a lot of kids who are know-it-alls. And I proclaim I'm like a know I've had to lose my know-it-all energy to move in the world.
Yeah.
And the dean who'd been there for a long time was just retiring. And so at graduation, that was his last retirement. And he
Mm,
is the dean that would bring everyone in saying, beginner's mind, beginner's mind.
yeah.
And that was his whole deal when he was bringing all those students in every year to that school. And they're going to miss that. I mean, he was just such an advocate for it. And yeah, I mean, the circles that I travel in a lot of times, we're all look at each other. It's like, okay, none of us are know-it-alls here. We can all learn from each other. Let it go, let it go, because we've been raised that you better be a know-it-all if you're going to survive. You know,
Right.
it's like a real catch-22 when you think of how if you went through a traditional education system, you know, don't look at somebody's paper because you're cheating. Real
Right.
world, you better look at somebody's paper because they can help you.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we really should be teaching people that the I don't know mind is a great place to be in because it's the beginning of exploration. It's the beginning of curiosity. It's, you know, I was never celebrated in my IT consulting by saying, I don't know. You say, I don't know, you lose your job. I mean, you're getting paid to know. And I think that's a fundamental flaw in the way companies work and the way leadership works, is assuming that people have to always have the answer. I would much rather have somebody that knows how to diligently dive in and sincerely find a solution to a problem through collaboration, through study, through whatever they do, than for somebody that just needs to always have the answer all the time without having any need to go look for other resources. So yeah, I think that's it's a powerful thing to be in the I don't know mind intentionally, not to be passive and say, I don't know. Oh, well,
Oh, no, no, no. Yeah.
yeah. But to say, I
Intentional.
don't know, and it'd be super fun for me to figure it out.
Yeah. Let me find that out for you.
Yeah,
Let me go do some research for you. I
that's
love
it.
it.
That's it.
Really cool. Wow. Wow. This is just really super powerful what you're bringing forward here. And I love the imagery because a lot of us are really visual learners, and I don't think I'll ever let go of this idea of, okay, what sandbag am I playing with today? Like,
Yeah.
that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, and it takes so much less effort and energy when the thing that was designed to ascend is just allowed to ascend, and it's so much of what I'm hoping to do with what I share in my work and what I'm sharing here is, you know, there's kind of two types of people. I know which one I am. You can see which one you are. They're the people that bring home like a new gadget or something, and they rip it open and they throw away the instruction manual and they just start playing with the thing. And then there are people who bring home the thing, sit down and meticulously pour over the instruction manual before they touch the thing. I know for me, I just rip it open and start playing with it. Which one are you typically, do you
Oh,
think?
I follow the instructions very
Follow
carefully.
the instructions. Yeah. And so the thing is that we've never, at least in my world and growing up, I never had anybody slow me down enough to say, hey, have you thought to look at the instruction manual for your life? And the operating manual rather for your life before you go out there. And I go, nah, I'll just figure it out along the way. And that's totally fine, except that it leaves features out that you're not even aware are there because you never read the operating instructions, right? If I have a remote control and I'm like, yeah, volume up, volume down, channel up, channel down, I know everything I need to know, right? But what I missed is that in the operating manual, if you hold these two buttons down, if the TV ever freezes, then it resets the whole TV. Well, if I don't know that's possible and I sit there and my TV's frozen, I think it's broken. And now what do? I got to go buy a new TV. And I've completely foundationally and fundamentally missed the way the TV operates. And if I had that knowledge, I wouldn't have to go buy a new TV. I'd be so excited with the one I already have because I know how to use it to the best of its ability. And so that's what this is all about. It's about bringing the operating manual for actually being happy into our lives, because very few of us have actually slowed down enough to actually figure out what that looks like.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, it's so cool. Today though, a lot of things aren't even coming with operating manuals. You have to go online to get them.
Right.
And I'm pretty old school. I'm pretty old. All right, I'm 60. So I like written things. Like my planners are written. I like to write. It's a kinesthetic learning. I like to write. I like to feel. And so I like to feel that manual. One came, I got a little thing the other day. The manual is about this big, okay? It's multi-pages, right? But the print is so tiny. And I know my eyes are kind of old, and that is a little bit of a thing, but not too bad. I'm like, how the heck I use this trusty device. One of my tools is like, what tool can I use? That's a question I like. What tool can I use? Because I used to get so frustrated with so many things not working, right? It's like, what tool can I use? So I grabbed this, took a picture, blew it up, and read the instructions.
Nice. But see, that's inventiveness. That's resourcefulness.
Oh, and that's a few sentences back here. If we could go rewind.
Yeah.
What I heard you say is like, what we really need to dig in and on for young people in particular, but for really all of us, is that resourcefulness.
Yeah.
That I say that all the time, but you were spinning it in a really cool way that it's like there's unlimited resources, but we get blocked and we feel like, oh yeah, when it's like, I don't know. Like,
Right.
oh, I don't know. Okay,
Right.
that takes you out of the game and takes you out of life. But it's like, I don't know. I'm curious. That's resourcefulness, moving us into that space. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of kids, like in school, I work with students as well as adults, and it'll be like, I don't know, like it's just too overwhelming. Like, cuts
Absolutely.
our fire out, takes the light out of our eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so here's the interesting thing is that, you know, we strive to have certain things, money, prestige, relationships, even health, like all these things. We strive to get those. Those are our ambitious goals that we want to hit, right? But if we knew that our next relationship or our next job or the next $100,000 we made or whatever was going to make us miserable, we wouldn't choose it, right? So we're not actually looking for those things. We're looking for what those things will bring us, we hope, which is happiness, right? So then if we don't learn early on where happiness actually comes from, then we will think it is through attaining these things, even though we have a track record that shows us it doesn't last. It never fulfills on the promise like we hoped it would.
Yeah.
So it's really important to start understanding, where does happiness actually come from? And my belief in this, thank goodness this is not original by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
I had really good teachers and mentors to help drill this into me, even though I fight it tooth and nail sometimes, is that happiness is simply a result of being in acceptance, or more specifically, not being in resistance to the current situation. And sadness is the flip of that. It's being resistant to the current situation. So if you say yes to a bad thing, quote, bad thing, it can actually be a good thing. And if you say no to a good thing, it can be a bad thing. So if you come to give me $10,000 and I go, Elle, I can't, no, I'm sorry, I just can't accept that from you. Now, all of a sudden, I've said no to what objectively most people would say is a great thing. But my resistance to it makes it a bad thing. I don't want the $10,000. I can't possibly receive that. So the flip side works as well. So if I can start saying yes more often to whatever life gives me, if I can start doing, as Byron Katie says, loving what is, right? To not argue with reality, because that's where suffering comes from. When I resist and I argue with what is, and I think it should be something else. So all of these things, being in, not knowing, or being afraid of the future, or whatever it is, if I welcome that in, if I say, yeah, that's exactly what I want right now. I want to feel lost. I want to feel sad. I want to feel any of these things. That lack of resistance can make it that you can actually have a contented experience, a peaceful experience of what normally would feel like suffering. And so that's kind of the goal here, is to look at this and say to yourself, where am I saying no to life? And I guarantee wherever you're saying no to life, wherever you're saying no to your experience, that is the source of your suffering.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think we should end with that. That's a cool takeaway right there, Jason.
Awesome.
Because you and I could probably talk for another 5 hours together.
Right.
So.
Well, I'm glad it was
I have
helpful.
one last question though.
Yeah.
How old were you when your transformation started to take place?
So I was 29 when I first started looking at personal growth.
Okay.
So it was really like 29, 30 where I started this. So I was not early on by any stretch of the imagination. I was a bit of a late bloomer with this stuff. But it doesn't matter how old you are. You could
Well, it
be
doesn't.
29, 39, 79. The truth is waiting no matter how old you are.
Yeah, yeah. I'll close out with a tiny story because it's when I was 18. I was still 17. I wasn't even 18 yet. Lake Winnipesaukee. We had a summer home in New Hampshire. Adam Sandler has made it famous. So we got real good friends on an island, and we go out for a party. And we would often be there on the weekend, a whole day, water skiing, playing, It's kind of evening, the sun's about to set, and they had relatives up. So like aunts and uncles, people I didn't know very well. So I'm sitting out on the end of the dock, and I'm the oldest kid of like a whole slew of kids that have been playing all day together. I was also in a beauty pageant, so I had like my beauty pageant bathing suit on at the time. So just cool and all right. So I'm sitting on the end of the dock, and one of the uncles comes out and he sits down next to me, which can be a little creepy. You told your little creepy story, so it's like a little bit creepy, right? Like he goes, I just had to come out here to share something with you, if you're open to that, like, kind of thing. So yeah, that's how he opens. And I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah. And he goes, so he was a police officer that worked specifically with juvenile delinquency. And he goes, I just kind of been observing everybody today, watching the party, you guys all doing your thing. And I've noticed, and yes, you are the oldest child here, but what I noticed is that you have a great deal of personal power. And he said, I want to give you a couple titles of books to read, which I went out and read. And he goes, I want you to think about your personal power, like this empowerment that comes through you, and how are you using it? Are you using it for good? Are you using it not for good? Are you being kind in this situation or not so kind? Like it was in one of the most profound times of my life. Like I'm 17, almost 18, just like going to college, or I was just on my first year of college, like what's coming next? And I read those books, and that began my journey. And really understanding who I am and evolving. It's an evolving thing all the time. So it's so cool. You're 29. It's beautiful.
I love that you had that experience. What an amazing gift that was.
I know. It is really something. I wish he was still alive, because I would thank him now. Thinking back in retrospective on it. I tend to do that. Like I reach out to people who have made a difference in my life. Like 20 years later, I just say, hey, I just want you to know.
Well, you're honoring him now by doing the work you're doing, which is fantastic.
Yes. Oh my gosh, the way I've helped him, especially students, since he was all into young people, is incredible. I've actually worked with 3 people who've been in prison too.
Wow.
Which is really just in the last year and a half. That's not something I ever would have guessed would have happened. But thank you so much. Oh, how can people get in touch with you? And I think you have a little something special for them too.
Yeah. So you can best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm at the Jason Goldberg. Jason Goldberg was taken, so I had to get the most pretentious name possible. The Jason Goldberg. The Jason Goldberg. So I share a lot of content there and stuff. So if you like these messages, there's all kinds of messages there like that. I'm going to give a free copy of my book Prison Break to your listeners. So
cool.
Free audio copy, digital copy, or if you pay a few bucks for shipping and handling in the US, I'll ship you a paperback copy, but I'll give you a link to be able to get a free copy of the book.
Oh, that's perfect. So the link is going to be on this page. It's also on the first page and last page of our series here. If you're like, oh, where is Jason's link? Look at the first page, the last page, and of course on this page too. And I'm so grateful that we have connected, and I can't wait to talk to you again sometime. This has been
thank
fantastic,
you so much.
Jason.
I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on, and I loved having our conversation together.
All right. Have a good day, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow on another issue of this leadership series.